a mannequin lives in my friend's house. I was 7 years old when it happened. Even now, in my mid-30s, I still have dreams about it. Mannequins make me uncomfortable, and I can't shake the feeling that if I don't solve this mystery, I'll never get over it. It's frustrating, really. I've tried talking to friends and partners about it a few times, but after being mocked for being scared of mannequins, I stopped mentioning it to anyone after my late teens. This story takes place during a summer vacation when I stayed at a friend's house for a few days. He had moved far away, and I was excited to visit him. Let's call him Tommy. It's not his real name, but it's similar to the nickname we used to call him. Tommy wasn't exactly a close friend. He was a bit odd, always on the outskirts of our social circles. The other kids found him strange and often avoided him. But when he invited me to his new home in the countryside, I was thrilled. Before he moved, Tommy had bragged endlessly about his home life. He could play games whenever he wanted, eat all the snacks he desired, and sleep in as late as he pleased without ever getting scolded. To my young ears, it sounded like a paradise. You see, my own home life was quite different. While we weren't poor, my parents were incredibly strict. Video games were a rare treat, snacks were carefully rationed, and sleeping past sunrise was unheard of. So when Tommy extended his invitation, I saw it as a chance to experience the freedom I'd always dreamed of. Convincing my parents was another matter entirely. I pleaded with them, using every argument I could think of. I even pitched it as a nature experience, knowing that Tommy's new home was in a rural area. My mother was initially against the idea, but as luck would have it, both my parents suddenly became swamped with work. Reluctantly, they agreed to let me go. As the day of my departure approached, I could barely contain my excitement. I imagined days filled with endless gaming sessions and nights of staying up late, gorging on snacks. My mother, on the other hand, seemed increasingly anxious as she helped me pack. When we finally arrived at Tommy's house, I felt my mother's grip on my hand tighten. The place was different from what I had imagined. It was an old, ramshackle wooden structure that looked more like an oversized shed than a house. The paint was peeling, and the porch creaked ominously under our feet. "Are you sure about this?" my mother whispered, her eyes darting around nervously. But then Tommy's mom came out to greet us, and something changed. The two women started chatting, and I saw my mother's shoulders relax. By the time we were ready to leave, she seemed much more at ease. "Be good," she said, giving me a quick hug. "And remember to thank Tommy's parents for having you." As I watched her car disappear down the dusty road, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. I was finally free from my parents' strict rules, but standing in front of that weathered old house, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly I had gotten myself into. Little did I know that the next few days would change me in ways I could never have imagined. The events that unfolded in that house, particularly in its forbidden storage shed, would haunt me for decades to come. But at that moment, as Tommy grabbed my arm and pulled me inside, eager to show me his video game collection, I was just a 7-year-old boy on the verge of an adventure. The inside of the house was a stark contrast to its exterior. While it was cluttered and a bit chaotic, it had a warm, lived-in feel that immediately put me at ease. The walls were covered in colorful posters and family photos, and the air smelled of freshly baked cookies. Tommy's mom, a plump, cheerful woman, ushered us into the kitchen and placed a plate of still-warm cookies in front of us. "Eat as many as you like," she said with a wink, and I felt my eyes widen in disbelief. At home, cookies were a rare treat, usually limited to 1 or 2 at a time. Here, I was being encouraged to eat my fill. It was just as Tommy had described, and I could hardly believe my luck. As we munched on cookies, Tommy excitedly told me about all the things we could do during my stay. He had a new video game he wanted to show me, and he promised we could stay up as late as we wanted playing it. His parents, he assured me, didn't mind at all. And tomorrow, Tommy said, his eyes gleaming with excitement, I'll show you around the property. There's a creek where we can catch frogs, and an old treehouse in the woods. It'll be awesome. I nodded enthusiastically, my mouth too full of cookies to respond. This was shaping up to be the best vacation ever. As the day wore on, I began to notice something odd about Tommy's family. They seemed to operate on a completely different schedule than what I was used to. Meals were eaten whenever someone felt hungry, rather than at set times. Tommy's dad, a tall, thin man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, would wander in and out of the house at random intervals, always seeming distracted by some project or another. But the strangest thing was the storage shed. It sat a short distance from the main house, its weathered boards and rusted metal roof making it look even older than the house itself. I noticed it almost immediately upon arrival, mainly because of the odd sounds coming from it. Every now and then, I'd hear a creaking noise, followed by a thump or a clatter. When I asked Tommy about it, he just shrugged. Oh, that's just the shed. We're not supposed to go near it. House rules. I found this peculiar. In my limited experience, storage sheds were boring places full of gardening tools and old junk. Why would it be off limits? But I didn't want to seem nosy or ungrateful, so I let the matter drop. As night fell, Tommy and I settled in for our promised video game marathon. True to his word, his parents didn't seem to care that we were still awake well past midnight, our eyes glued to the flickering TV screen. It was exhilarating, this taste of freedom. Yet, even as I reveled in the late-night gaming session, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the way the house creaked and groaned in the night wind. Or perhaps it was the memory of those strange noises from the shed. Whatever it was, it left me with a vague sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. As I finally crawled into the sleeping bag on Tommy's floor, my mind buzzing with the excitement of the day and the promise of adventures to come, I had no idea that my curiosity about that old shed would soon lead me down a path I could never have anticipated. A path that would leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about the world and the people in it. But for now, exhausted from travel and overstimulated by cookies and video games, I drifted off to sleep, the faint sound of creaking wood and rustling leaves from outside the window following me into my dreams. The next morning, I woke up to the unfamiliar sensation of sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, I panicked, thinking I'd overslept and would be in trouble. Then I remembered where I was. In Tommy's house, there were no strict wake-up times, no rushed breakfasts before school. I lay there for a while, savoring this new freedom. When I finally made my way downstairs, I found Tommy already awake, sprawled on the living room floor with a bowl of cereal, watching cartoons. His mom was nowhere to be seen. "Help yourself to whatever you want," Tommy said, not taking his eyes off the TV. "Mom and Dad are still asleep." I stood in the kitchen, marveling at the array of sugary cereals and snacks that were freely available. At home, breakfast was a regimented affair of whole grain toast and fruit. Here, I could have cookies for breakfast if I wanted. It was exhilarating and a little overwhelming. After breakfast, Tommy took me on a tour of the property. The house itself was even more ramshackle up close. It was a wooden structure that seemed to have been added onto haphazardly over the years, creating an asymmetrical shape that defied logic. The wood was weathered and gray in some places, with patches of peeling paint in others. Despite its rundown appearance, there was something charming about it, like a house from a fairy tale that had seen better days. The yard was overgrown, with tall grass and wildflowers growing in patches. An old tire swing hung from a gnarled oak tree, swaying gently in the breeze. But what caught my attention most was the storage shed. It sat about 50 feet from the main house, a squat, dark structure that seemed to loom larger than its actual size. Like the house, it was made of wood, but the planks were so weathered they were almost black. The roof was corrugated metal, rusted in places, with patches that looked like they'd been hastily repaired. As we approached, I noticed something odd about the shed's construction. The planks didn't quite fit together properly, leaving gaps in places. One such gap, near the corner closest to us, was wide enough that I thought I could see inside if I got close enough. Just then, Tommy's mom called out from the back porch. "Boys! Remember, don't play near the shed, okay? It's not safe." Her tone was light, almost casual, but I saw Tommy stiffen slightly. "Okay, Mom," he called back, then turned to me. "Come on, let's go check out the creek." As we walked away, I heard it again, that creaking, squeaking sound from inside the shed, followed by a thump. I turned to look, but Tommy grabbed my arm, pulling me along. Throughout the day, I found my attention continually drawn back to the shed. Every so often, I'd hear those strange noises. Sometimes it was the creaking, sometimes a clattering sound, like something being knocked over. Once, I could have sworn I heard a muffled voice, but when I mentioned it to Tommy, he just shrugged and changed the subject. It was late afternoon when it happened. Tommy and I were playing in the yard, tossing a frisbee back and forth. I threw it a little too hard, and it sailed past Tommy, landing near the shed. As he ran to retrieve it, I found myself near that gap in the planks I'd noticed earlier. Without really thinking about it, I peered inside. What I saw in that moment has stayed with me for decades, burned into my memory with a clarity that time has never managed to dull. Inside the shed was a mannequin. But not just any mannequin, this one was moving. It was stark white, the kind you'd see in a department store, with jointed limbs and a featureless face. But unlike the static displays I was used to, this one was in motion. Its movements were jerky and unnatural, its joints making that creaking, squeaking sound I'd been hearing. The mannequin was dressed in clothes that seemed too big for it, hanging loosely on its frame like they'd been thrown on haphazardly. As I watched, frozen in place, it shuffled across the floor of the shed, its movements following a repetitive pattern. I must have made some sound of surprise because suddenly Tommy was there, pulling me away from the gap. "What are you doing?" he hissed, looking nervously back at the house. What was that?" I stammered, my heart racing. "Is that some kind of robot?" Tommy's face scrunched up in a way I couldn't interpret. Was it confusion? Worry? "That's my uncle," he said simply, as if that explained everything. I stared at him, waiting for more explanation, but none came. I wanted to ask more questions. How could that be his uncle? Why was he in the shed? Why did he look like that? But the words stuck in my throat. Even at 7, I had enough social awareness to know that prying into family matters could be seen as rude. Besides, The look on Tommy's face made it clear he didn't want to discuss it further. So I swallowed my questions and tried to act normal for the rest of the day. But my mind kept returning to what I'd seen. The more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. If that thing, that mannequin, was really Tommy's uncle, why did it move like that? Why was it kept in the shed? And why had Tommy's mom warned us to stay away? That night, as Tommy and I played video games, I found myself constantly distracted. Every creak of the house made me jump, imagining it was the sound of that mannequin's joints. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see a white figure shuffling across the yard. Tommy seemed oblivious to my distraction, chattering away about the game and his plans for the rest of my visit. But I noticed his mom watching me with a worried expression when she thought I wasn't looking. Just before bed, as I was brushing my teeth, Tommy's mom came into the bathroom. "Hey, sweetie," she said, her voice gentle. "I saw you near the shed today. You know you're not supposed to go there, right?" I nodded, my mouth full of toothpaste. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Look, I know it might seem interesting, but it's not safe. There's equipment in there that could hurt you if you're not careful. So please, stay away from the shed, okay?" I nodded again, unable to speak around my toothbrush. She gave me a small smile and left, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. As I lay in my sleeping bag that night, listening to Tommy's soft snores, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The mannequin's jerky movements played on repeat in my mind. I tried to reconcile it with Tommy's casual "that's my uncle" and his mom's vague warnings. Nothing made sense. But one thing was clear: there was more to this family and this house than met the eye. And despite the warnings, despite the growing unease in the pit of my stomach, I knew I couldn't leave it alone. I had to know more. Little did I know, my curiosity was about to lead me down a path that would change everything. The mannequin in the shed was just the beginning, and the truth, if I could ever uncover it, was far stranger and more terrifying than anything my 7-year-old mind could imagine. As I drifted off to sleep, the last thing I heard was that familiar creaking sound, drifting in through the open window. In my half-asleep state, it almost sounded like words, a garbled message I couldn't quite understand. But that was impossible, right? Right? Over the next few days, I found myself drawn to the shed like a moth to a flame. Despite Tommy's mom's warnings and my own unease, I couldn't stay away. Every chance I got, I'd sneak glances through that gap in the planks, watching the white figure inside. The more I observed, the more fascinated I became. The mannequin, or Tommy's uncle, as he had called it, moved in a consistent pattern. It would shuffle from one end of the shed to the other, turn, then shuffle back. Sometimes it would pause, its blank face turned towards a wall or a stack of boxes, before resuming its endless back and forth. What struck me as odd was how the mannequin seemed completely oblivious to its surroundings. Once, a stray cat knocked over something outside the shed, causing a loud clatter. I jumped at the noise, but the mannequin didn't react at all. It just continued its robotic movements, unperturbed. Another time, I saw that some boxes had fallen, partially blocking its path. But instead of going around them, the mannequin simply walked into them, pushing them aside with its stiff legs. It was as if it couldn't see the obstacles, blindly following its programmed route. The mannequin itself was a strange sight. Its surface was a stark, unnatural white, like freshly fallen snow or a blank sheet of paper. In some places, particularly around the joints, the white surface had chipped away, revealing a grayish material underneath. It reminded me of the cheap plastic toys that would chip and reveal their true color beneath the paint. But it was the sound that really got to me. Every movement was accompanied by a cacophony of creaks, squeaks, and grinding noises. It was loudest at the joints, knees, elbows, neck, creating a discordant symphony of mechanical sounds that seemed far too loud for something its size. At first, I had thought it must be some kind of robot or strange invention. The jerky movements and mechanical sounds certainly suggested as much. But the more I watched, the less sure I became. I found myself oddly addicted to watching it. It wasn't fear, exactly. More like a morbid fascination. The mannequin was undeniably creepy, but it was also mesmerizing. I couldn't look away, much like how you can't resist picking at a scab even though you know you shouldn't. I'd never seen anything like it before, and each glimpse felt like I was peeling back another layer of a mystery I couldn't quite understand. One afternoon, Tommy and I were drawing with crayons. Without really thinking about it, I started sketching the mannequin. I drew its stark white body, the ill-fitting clothes, trying to capture that sense of unnatural movement on paper. Tommy leaned over to look at my drawing. "Oh, you drew Uncle," he said casually, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I opened my mouth to ask questions, so many questions, but before I could, Tommy's mom walked in. Her eyes widened when she saw my drawing, and she quickly took the paper away. Now, she said, her voice strained but trying to sound light, "we don't draw things like that. It's not nice." I noticed she didn't say it wasn't real, or that I had a vivid imagination. She just took the drawing and changed the subject, steering us towards other activities. It was strange. They clearly didn't want me looking at or talking about the mannequin, but their attempts to stop me were half-hearted at best. It was as if they were caught between wanting to keep it a secret and not knowing how to explain it away. The incident that changed everything happened late one night. I woke up needing to use the bathroom. As I was washing my hands, I glanced out the small bathroom window. The shed was visible from there, a dark shape against the night sky. But something was different. There was a faint light coming from inside, visible through the gaps in the planks. My heart started racing. In all my observations, I'd never seen a light on in the shed before. What was happening? Was someone in there? Was it Tommy's dad, maybe, checking on his brother? Curiosity overwhelmed my fear and better judgment. I had to know what was going on. Quietly, I snuck out of the house and approached the shed. The creaking sounds were there, as always, but there was something else too. A faint, staticky sound, like a badly tuned radio. I peered through the gap in the planks, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The mannequin was sitting on an old, sagging couch. In front of it was a small TV, its screen flickering with silent images. The mannequin's blank face was turned towards the TV, as if it was watching the show. It was such a mundane scene, and yet it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever witnessed. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Why would anyone set up a TV for a mannequin? Why position it on a couch, as if it was a real person relaxing after a long day? And then there were the inconsistencies that my young mind struggled to reconcile. 1. I had never seen the TV on during the day. Why was it on now, in the middle of the night? 2. Why bother sitting the mannequin down? It wasn't like it could get tired or need rest. 3. The whole setup, the couch, the TV, the posture of the mannequin, it was all so normal, so everyday. And that's what made it so deeply, fundamentally wrong. As these thoughts whirled through my head, something happened that would haunt me for years to come. The mannequin turned its head. Slowly, jerkily, with that awful creaking sound, it rotated until its featureless face was pointing directly at me. For a moment, I was frozen in place, unable to move or even breathe. Then, in the dim light from the TV, I saw something that shattered my world. The mannequin had eyes. Real, human eyes, set in that blank white face. And they were looking right at me. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I ran back to the house, not caring if I made noise, not caring about anything except getting away from those eyes. I burst into Tommy's room, shaking him awake. "Tommy! Tommy, wake up!" I hissed, my voice trembling. Tommy groaned and rolled over. "What?" "Go back to sleep," he mumbled. But the mannequin, "Your uncle," I saw dash. I couldn't even form coherent sentences. How could I explain what I'd seen? Tommy sat up, rubbing his eyes. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I saw the mannequin in the shed. It was sitting on a couch, watching TV. And it looked at me. It had eyes, Tommy. Real eyes. Tommy stared at me for a long moment, his face unreadable in the darkness. Then he flopped back down on his bed. "You were dreaming. Go back to sleep." But I wasn't dreaming. I knew what I'd seen. As I lay in my sleeping bag, every creak of the house made me flinch. I kept imagining those eyes, human eyes in an inhuman face, staring at me through the darkness. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every creak of the house made me flinch. I kept imagining those eyes, human eyes in an inhuman face, staring at me through the darkness. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, I lay there, a scared and confused 7-year-old, unsure of what I'd seen and what it all meant. The next morning, I woke up feeling groggy and disoriented. For a moment, I couldn't remember why I felt so uneasy. Then it all came flooding back: the mannequin, the TV, those eyes. I shuddered, pulling my sleeping bag tighter around me. Tommy was already up, playing video games as if nothing had happened. His mom was in the kitchen, humming as she made breakfast. Everything seemed so normal, it was almost surreal. How could they act like this when there was whatever that was in the shed? I was picking at my cereal, trying to work up the courage to say something, when Tommy's mom turned to me with a stern look. "Tommy told me you were out of bed last night," she said, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. "And that you were near the shed again." My stomach dropped. I shot a betrayed look at Tommy, but he was pointedly avoiding my gaze, his eyes glued to his game. "I'm very disappointed," Tommy's mom continued. "We have rules for a reason. The shed is off limits. It's dangerous. You could have been hurt." I wanted to argue, to ask about what I'd seen, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain what I'd witnessed without sounding crazy? And a small part of me was afraid of the answer I might get. "I'm sorry," I mumbled instead, staring at my soggy cereal. She sighed, her expression softening slightly. "Just don't do it again, okay? Promise me you'll stay away from the shed." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. What else could I do? I was just a kid in someone else's house. I didn't have the words to express the confusion and fear swirling inside me. For the rest of my stay, I tried my best to avoid the shed. I threw myself into playing video games with Tommy, exploring the creek, anything to keep my mind off what I'd seen. But it was always there, lurking at the edges of my thoughts. Every time I heard a creak or a thump, I'd jump, half expecting to see that white figure shuffling towards me. At night, I'd lie awake, straining my ears for any unusual sounds. More than once, I thought I heard that staticky TV noise, but I was too scared to check. Tommy acted like nothing had happened. He never mentioned the shed or his uncle again, and when I tried to bring it up once, he quickly changed the subject. His parents were the same, going about their daily routines as if there wasn't something impossible living in their backyard. On my last day, as we were playing in the yard, a gust of wind blew our frisbee off course. It landed near the shed, and without thinking, I ran to retrieve it. As I bent to pick it up, I couldn't help but glance at the gap in the planks. The mannequin was there, shuffling back and forth as always. But this time, it paused in its pacing. Slowly, jerkily, it turned its head towards me. I couldn't see any eyes in its blank face, but I felt seen. Known. It raised an arm, the movement accompanied by that awful creaking sound, as if it was reaching out to me. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the house, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Tommy found me there, huddled in a corner of his room. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking genuinely concerned. I shook my head, unable to speak. How could I explain what I'd just seen? How could I make him understand when he acted like it was all normal? That evening, as my parents came to pick me up, I felt a mix of relief and lingering dread. I was glad to be going home, away from the mystery of the shed. But a part of me was afraid that, by leaving, I'd never know the truth. As we drove away, I watched Tommy's house disappear in the rearview mirror. I thought about telling my parents what had happened, but something held me back. They were strict, and I was afraid they'd be angry that I'd broken rules at someone else's house. Besides, how could I explain something I didn't understand myself? So I kept quiet, watching the familiar scenery of home replace the strangeness of Tommy's neighborhood. But even as the distance grew, I couldn't shake the memory of what I'd seen. The mannequin's jerky movements, the sound of its creaking joints, those eyes in the night, it all swirled in my mind, a puzzle I couldn't solve. I didn't know it then, but those few days at Tommy's house would stay with me for years to come. The mystery of the shed and its inhabitant would linger in my thoughts, resurfacing in quiet moments and uneasy dreams. It was a reminder that the world was stranger and more unsettling than I'd ever imagined, a realization that would color my perceptions for the rest of my life. As we pulled into our driveway, my mom turned to me with a smile. "Did you have a good time at Tommy's?" she asked. I nodded, forcing a smile of my own. "Yeah," I lied, "it was fun." What else could I say? How could I explain that in just a few days, my understanding of the world had been turned upside down? That I'd seen something that defied explanation, something that both fascinated and terrified me? So I said nothing. I went inside, unpacked my bags, and tried to slip back into the routine of my normal life. But as I lay in bed that night, in my own familiar room, I couldn't help but wonder about Tommy and his family. Were they sitting down to dinner now, going about their evening as if nothing was amiss? Was the mannequin the uncle still pacing in its shed, or was it sitting on that sagging couch, its blank face turned towards a flickering TV screen? I pulled my covers up to my chin, trying to push these thoughts away. But I knew, even then, that they would never truly leave me. The mystery of Tommy's shed had become a part of me, a strange, unsettling chapter in my life that I could neither fully understand nor entirely forget. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself hoping that I'd wake up and realize it had all been a dream. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The creaking sounds, the blank white face, those all too human eyes, they were real. And no matter how much I might wish otherwise, I knew they would stay with me for a long, long time. I'm in my mid-30s now, but the memory of that summer at Tommy's house still lingers. It's not something that consumes my every waking moment or anything so dramatic. It's more like a splinter I can't quite dig out, a persistent itch I can't scratch. Mannequins still make me uncomfortable. I find myself avoiding store windows and certain sections of department stores. It's not a paralyzing fear or anything, just a vague unease that settles in my stomach when I see those blank, lifeless faces. Sometimes, I dream about it. In my dreams, I'm back in that shed, watching the white figure shuffle back and forth. Sometimes it turns to look at me, its movements accompanied by that awful creaking sound. I always wake up from these dreams feeling unsettled, the echo of creaking joints ringing in my ears. As I grew older, I tried to make sense of what I'd seen. In my late teens and early 20s, I spent hours in libraries, poring over books on robotics, prosthetics, and even paranormal phenomena. I scoured newspaper archives, looking for any mention of strange occurrences in the area where Tommy had lived. But I never found anything conclusive. I've considered every possible explanation I can think of. Could it have been someone held captive? No, that doesn't make sense. The shed was rickety and poorly secured. I remember thinking even as a child that I could have knocked down the walls with a good kick. Whatever was in there, it wasn't being forcibly contained. Was it a sick family member? That doesn't fit either. Who would keep an ill person in such conditions? Besides, despite its strange appearance and movements, the mannequin never seemed to be in distress or pain. Could it have been some kind of advanced robot? This explanation feels closest to what I saw, but it doesn't account for everything. The jerky movements and the creaking sounds fit, but what about those eyes? They were so real, so human. And why would anyone create a robot that looked like a mannequin, dress it in ill-fitting clothes, and keep it in a shed? Was it actually a person? This possibility is perhaps the most unsettling. The skin, if you could call it that, was unmistakably the texture of a mannequin. I saw places where the white surface had chipped away, revealing a grayish material underneath. No human skin looks like that. What makes this whole experience even stranger is that when I've tried to ask about Tommy, no one seems to remember him. I've reached out to a few kids I used to play with back then, and none of them recall a boy named Tommy who moved away. But when I asked my mom about it, she confirmed that I did indeed spend a few days at a friend's house that summer. So I know I didn't imagine the whole thing. It's not like this experience ruined my life or anything so dramatic. The mannequin never attacked me or even directly threatened me. It was just there, moving in ways that mannequins shouldn't move, existing in a way that defied explanation. But in a way, that makes it worse. The sheer mundanity of it, the casual way Tommy and his family treated it, that's what really gets under my skin. You know how unsettling it is to think about mannequins acting like people? Well, imagine seeing it firsthand. Imagine being a grown man, reasonably fit and capable of defending yourself, and still feeling your heart race when you pass a store display. That's what this experience did to me. I've tried to find others who've had similar experiences. In this age of internet forums and social media, you'd think if anyone else had encountered something like this, they'd have shared their story. But I've never found anything quite like what I saw in Tommy's shed. So here I am, a grown man still puzzling over something I saw as a 7-year-old kid. I don't spend my days obsessing over it or anything, but it's always there in the back of my mind. When I see a mannequin, when I hear a creaking sound, when I wake up from one of those dreams, it all comes rushing back. I wish I had asked more questions back then. I wish I had been brave enough to tell my parents or a teacher. But I was just a kid, and I didn't have the words to describe what I'd seen or the courage to push for answers. Now, all these years later, I'm left with more questions than answers. Was Tommy's uncle some kind of elaborate hoax? A hallucination brought on by an overactive imagination and lack of sleep? Or was it something else entirely, something that defies conventional explanation? I don't know if I'll ever find out the truth. Part of me wants to track down Tommy, to go back to that house and see if the shed is still there. But another part of me is afraid of what I might find, or worse, what I might not find. So I live with this unresolved mystery, this bizarre chapter of my childhood that refuses to fully close. It's not all bad, though. In a way, it's a reminder that the world is stranger and more complex than we often assume. It's taught me to keep an open mind, to question what I see and hear. But it's also taught me that some questions don't have easy answers. Sometimes, the most unsettling things are the ones that don't fit neatly into our understanding of the world. They linger, like that creaking mannequin in the shed, moving in ways they shouldn't, existing in a gray area between the possible and the impossible. And so, the memory of Tommy's uncle remains with me, a peculiar footnote in the story of my life. It's not a ghost story, not really. There were no jump scares, no bloody hooks, no messages written in blood. Just a white figure in a shed, moving when it shouldn't, watching TV when it couldn't, turning to look at me with eyes that shouldn't exist. In the end, maybe that's what makes it truly unsettling. Not the overt horror of a monster or a ghost, but the subtle wrongness of something that simply shouldn't be. A mannequin that moves, that watches, that sees. A family that treats it as normal. A shed that holds secrets I may never understand. As I sit here, typing this out, I can almost hear that creaking sound again. I know it's just my imagination, just the memory playing tricks on me. But for a moment, I'm 7 years old again, peering through a gap in weathered planks, watching something impossible move in the shadows. And I wonder, not for the first time and surely not for the last, what really was in Tommy's shed.